So, one of the things that we've talked about, is the end of the world scenario. And the end of the world scenario is not a scenario I believe in, simply because, A, historically speaking, there's never been an end, despite endless prophecies, predictions of the end, including up until the modern day, with the idea of climate that is the major threat, the biggest threat to humanity. That's another end of the world scenario. It's not painted as an end of the world scenario because it doesn't have the biblical, doesn't have the religiosity, it doesn't have the biblical narrative, and it's based in science. But no one can deny that it is the biggest threat to the world, the planet, is climate. That's an end of the world scenario. So all of those will never manifest because some of them are imagined or delusional. Some of them just may never happen, and some of them are kind of constructions as a manner to motivate large scales of people. So, and this goes back to ancient times. How do you keep, 100,000 people in order when there's only 100 people at the top? You create an end of the world scenario, and you shake the sky, and you paint the ocean red, and you get out your priests, and then people start to worry, start to be scared. It's a pattern. It's a pattern. And it's a technique, it's a strategy, and it works. It works. But if you look at historically speaking, there's never been an end of the world. So that's part A. It's not going to happen. Part B is, if there was a real threat, and there are such things as real threats, B, but we are not able to perceive that threat as it really is. And that's because it's happening at a level either beyond our science or beyond our instruments, or, as they like to say, it's classified. So only the top know about it, and it doesn't get into the rest of society. If there was something that was a threat. Again, with the climate, as I've said before, there is extreme weather, and that's in the public view. But what we can't see is the climate weapons, right? So it's always been hard for the public to make informed decisions. And there's reason for that. I'm not arguing. I'm not going to argue that there's no reason for it, right? Because people would just misread things, misinterpret. They would lose trust in institutions and all that stuff. I understand that. By the same token, what concerns me, or someone like me, because I'm not alone, is that scaring people, is it necessary? Does it bring society to a better end? And I'm not so sure of that. And that's why I talk. That's why I speak. That's why I share my information. And, the people at the top don't like it when I speak, because I know what I'm talking about. I don't have the numbers I don't have the audience as much as others. But trust me when I say people at the top know what I'm talking about, and I know what I'm talking about. And we're still kind of like, grade school. We haven't gotten out of grade school. And that's been a challenge. This has been a challenge for many years. I've been speaking now since at least '06. So that's 15, 16 years, right? And there's always something to talk about. Now, the other part, so part C now of this end of the world scenario, see how hidden it is? There's the public, there's the classified stuff we're not aware of, other levels, other dimensions, and then we get into C. What is C? C goes back to the fact this is a space colony. You're not aware of that. You don't know that. I am the only person who has stated that emphatically. Right? That's why we have so many cultures here. Because cultures came from other planets, other planetary bodies with those cultures came here and settled. It's called settlers. You call it immigration, but it's interplanetary immigration. And that's why we have countries, we have huge countries filled with certain cultures and races of people that did not originate from Adam and Eve, because Adam and Eve were only one race. In case you haven't figured that out, Adam and Eve, there is no Asian Adam and Eve according to biblical scripture. But there would have to be Asian Adam and Eve to have Asian people, or Chinese Adam and Eve to have Chinese people, or Vietnamese people. Right? There has to be something to scientifically to explain that. There isn't scientifically explained it. Unless we can say that all the children of Adam and Eve were genetically engineered. Well, you can only genetically engineer so much. So they were like manufactured. And that's a lot of people to manufacture. It makes more sense that they came from another planet. When you go through the data, they landed here from other planets. And yes, other stuff was going on, and that's why, the Earth has a lot of history. The Homo sapien is 40,000 years old, according to the anthropology. So 40,000, we don't remember what we had for breakfast last week, right? We don't know if OJ is guilty or innocent. So 40,000 years ago, we have no idea. There's no video. And that's why there's people like me. Because I get my information from intelligent people. I do a lot of research. So we have this planet that was colonized a long time ago, before the memory. And that memory, that knowledge was taken or removed or redacted, or there may be books. There may be books of those facts that are in secret libraries that we are not privy to, and that will never get out. And I don't have the key to get in those libraries. There are many books, in fact, that have secrets, powerful secrets of magic and healing and human beings, interstellar settlement, all that stuff. It is available. A lot of it's been removed. So, as a space colony, I like to think of it as ownership. And when someone buys a space colony, somebody has to own it. It's like a building, a piece of real estate. Somebody wants it. It's for sale. It's for lease, right? It's under new management, right? It's a valuable construction. It's valuable. It's got billions of people. It's orbiting a star. How much do you want for it? How much do you want for your planet? So somebody or some group or some council owns this planet. Somebody has to own it. Something. Somebody has to manage it. Even a park. Someone has to be responsible for the park. Somebody. It's not just, it's there. But if something happens to it, who fixes it? Is it the city? Right? Is it the government? Is it the city? Is it privately owned? Same with the planet. The principles, it's just much bigger. And the problem with people is it's too big. It's too big. I've never sold a planet before. I've never seen a planet for sale. How can it be for sale? It is. It is. Because logic says if there's value, somebody wants it. If there's a value, somebody has money to buy it, or the gold, or whatever I'll give you my planet for yours, right? Resources. It's got lots of gold and aluminum and salt. We need salt. So we'll buy, I'm going to buy the earth, and I got the salt, and I got the aluminum. There are other things. Now, the people, let's say the people who own this planet are beyond our perception. And they're going to stay beyond our perception. Like if you take the biggest company, I don't know who owns it. I don't know where they live. And their name might be mentioned in the news, but that they're just part of a company and somebody owns that company, right? So we don't really know the owner because it could be intermediaries. The people managing this place, they work for somebody else. And they have a holding company and that belongs to somebody else. So ultimately, we don't know who that is. We don't even know who's managing this place. What I'm saying is there is ownership. It's a space colony. It has value. There are people here, right? If I own a company and there's 50,000 employees, I'm responsible for 50,000 employees. I'm not just going to purchase it on a whim. And people like to think that, well, it's just whatever. What if they're evil? No. So there's a vetting process. There's a process. There's applications. You have to make presentations. You have to. What do you want to do? If we let you buy the place, what are you going to do with it? Well, I'm going to use it for nuclear detonation. Sorry. I've got some experimental bioweapons I need to test. Sorry. Right? You get rid of all the psychotics and the sociopaths, and there probably are quite a few. So you sell the planet to someone who says, okay, I'm going to do this. And when you buy a company, it's the same thing. What's your plan? What's your 10-year plan? How much are you going to invest? Are you going to take care of employees? Are you going to buy a new infrastructure? Are you going to improve the equipment? What's your plan? I just like your company. Well, what are you going to do with it? What's your history of managing other companies? there's a vetting process. So we can assume that whoever owns this planet has gone through that vetting process, and that they're responsible, moral. You got 7 billion, 8 billion people. You're not just going to give it to a lunatic. So somebody owns it, whether it's leased, purchased, or temporary, or it's 1,000, you get it for 1,000 years. I don't know those details. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because there's an ownership. And at some point, the ownership transfers. And what I've said in previous videos, if you look back in the last couple of years, I believe there was a transfer of ownership. And when I was talking about the transfer of ownership of this planet, it was around the time just preceded this giant pandemic. Which is interesting, because there's a change of ownership, and then there's a kind of like a shutdown of the planet. Because that's basically what the pandemic did. Shut down. It gave everybody a reason to shut down, shut up, lock up, don't work, don't travel, right? And this followed what I believe, this is my opinion. That's all my opinion. It's all my opinion. I can't prove it. But I believe that there was a change in ownership. And I talked about this. I talked about the change in ownership back before the pandemic, around that time. And then there was a shutdown. So it kind of supports the idea there was a change in ownership. It's bright. And I'm trying to find some sun here. There was a change in ownership. And then the new owners, as they bring in their team and they set everything up, the whole planet shut down. It seems a little too coincidental, right? And it would make sense that the new owner, they want to maybe study things. Maybe they want, if people are not moving, they can do their tests and analysis and observations, and they can put things in place. Maybe there are things in place into the architecture, into the sub-architecture, into the dimensional architecture that would improve the system, change the infrastructure. There's a lot of people during the pandemic who died. So here's your chance to leave, right? There's a new owner. I don't want to be under the new owner. I'm out. Pandemic. I'm out. Everybody's leaving. Lots of people died. We'll assume they all died. So let's assume they left. Again, there's a lot of, this is the business though. There's a lot of, we're speculating, we're making some kind of analysis, we're trying to understand the situation. But what happens is the owner has an interest in the planet. That's good for us, because if they are concerned about the planet, if there is a threat to the planet, let's say there's a giant asteroid And let's say human infrastructure can't stop it, so then the owners will use their technology to stop it. And we will never even, they'll just say, scientists will say, well, there was a big asteroid, and then it just changed course. It was gently, it's like if it was gently nudged. You know how many times have you seen that? How many times have you seen that? When there's something imminent that suddenly becomes nothing. How many times? Be aware of it. Be aware of it. I'm not here to prove my theory. I'm here to explain. This is what I understand. That it's a space colony, and there's an ownership. It's just like a big company with 50,000 employees. Somebody owns it, and the CEO is not going to destroy the company. The CEO wants to take care of the employees. And there are unions, and there are managers, and there are sub-managers, and there's a board of directors. There's a lot of instruments in place to ensure that if the CEO doesn't do their job, they are put back in line or they're removed. They just remove it and put another CEO in. So there's a board. Now maybe at the planetary scale, we're going to call it a council. We'll call it the Council of Light. The council then manages the owner or group of owners. And if you're not doing your job, we're going to usher you out, or we'll help you, right? So there's a lot of things that we are not privy to, and I think this is the key. Again, the light here is really striking. This is, we're not privy to. There you go. When you want the sun, it's not there. So there's a situation that if there was a threat to the planet, whether it's a dimensional threat, whether it's a physical threat, whether it's a solar threat, asteroid, another culture, race, interplanetary, whatever the threat, if we cannot do it, or we're not aware of it, or we don't have that technology or level of understanding, then the owners will manage that threat. That's their obligation, right? In some cases, they'll usher in that technology. There'll be a new development, new technology, and scientists and people will do something, right? That's transferred. There's a transfer of knowledge. Suddenly, there's a new invention, there's a new discovery, right? There's a new disease, well, there's a new drug. So the owner, in the past, it may have been different, where there's a kind of an intervention. There's a flash of light. But in these days, it's much more subtle, and there's this transfer of ideas and technology and know-how so that we can deal with the situations. So the situations are being dealt with just by right, when we're teaching people about staying positive, right? Don't put out negative energy. That may be a way to prevent calamity, right? So we're not generating negativity. We're not generating hate and causing, all kind of infighting and wars. So there are people teaching you how to manage your thoughts, your minds. There are therapists. There are shamans. And that is also, at a higher level, that's also important. So there's no real intervention, as in the past, there may have been like an intervention, right? Big door of light opens, people land, and the gods. But these days, it's much more subtle. If there are things that are beyond our capacity, our ability, our know-how, our perception, my understanding is that there are obligations from those who either manage or own this place to deal with, such that there's no ultimate destruction. That doesn't mean you can do what you want. You have obligation. As a person, you have obligations to live your life accordingly as you came here, to live your life, be respectful, learn what you came here to learn, achieve what you came here to achieve. That's why there's a provision. That's why the air is clean, there's a sun, and there's clean water. So that's your obligation. And you have to follow it. If you don't, there are consequences. At a higher level, the planetary level, they have obligations. If a company is in trouble financially, it's the CEO and the board of directors. They have to find new funding, new investors. That's their job. That's their obligation. They're not going to say, oh, I give up. They'll go out and get new investors. They'll get new funding. They'll launch new products. They'll make it happen. That's their obligation. If you're a parent and your child is sick, you're not going to just say, oh, what? Just die. Just die already. You are going to die. No, you're going to say, your obligation, get them to a doctor. Get them to a therapist. Get them to a rehab. Get them to a hospital. Call 911. That's your obligation as a parent, right? Nobody really says that's your obligation, but you know it's your obligation. That's my child. That's my company. It's my obligation. It's my planet. It's my planet. I'm obligated. I cannot let this stuff happen. I cannot have another world war, so we go do something. And it's always this, right, balance. Things get a little rough. Things get pretty good. Things get a little crazy. Things get a little boring. It's this homeostasis. And if you look at, what I'm saying is, if you look at history, right? History, if you go back 5,000 years, there are some bad points and there are some good points and some good points and some bad points. But overall, there's a kind of a homeostasis. For all of the threats and all of the prophecies, and whether new or old, we're still here. And who knows how many owners. And you don't even have to know what they do. If I explained some of it, you probably would not understand it. No, you wouldn't understand it. So they would never explain it to you. Unless it's in like a science fiction movie. Right? Even then we don't understand it because it's fiction. But it's there. Will the world ever end? I don't think so. It's been how many years? It's been, the planet is 4.5 billion years old. The sun is about the same, 4.6 billion years old. Let's round it to 5. Scientists have said that the planet will last another 5 billion years. I probably won't be around that long. But the planet might. There'll be all kinds of people here. You never know, right? So one of the hard parts of discussing this topic is scale. It's scale. It's hard for us to understand the scale. right? Planetary scale, interplanetary scale, galactic scale. Because those timelines, they're very long. Like we only live 100 years if we're lucky, 80. People die at 77, 78. But let's say 100 years is our scale. We think in terms of 100. If we're lucky, if you're lucky, 100. And the last 20 are not very good anyway. So planetary scale, you're thinking thousands, millions. Interplanetary, millions. Galactic, billions. So we are at the 100 scale, right? And the more advanced cultures are at the 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, million. There's no way we can understand a culture that lives for 1,000,000 years. There's no way. Just don't even try. But they do. What do you do for 1,000,000 years? Like it gets boring after the first 1,000 years. You're bored. And unless you start building planets.